Welcome to the ClassCast Podcast. Before we get started with today's episode, make sure you check out Edupodlooza on Sunday, June 27th. You're going to hear from a variety of the most popular education podcasters in the United States, Canada, and beyond. We're going to be talking all kinds of current issues, important topics, also some games, some fun, radio drama, poetry reading, all kinds of stuff going on that day. Make sure you check it out. Again, Edupodlooza. You can find more information by following me on Twitter at ClassCastPod. Also check out the Unprofessional Development Podcast or look for hashtag Edupodlooza on Twitter. Welcome to the ClassCast Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Tibbens. Today, we'll be speaking with Melinda Arnost, the author of Empowering Inclusion, the tool teachers need to help all students succeed. Melinda is an intervention specialist working really K through 12, but focusing now in early elementary education. And so this seemed like a great opportunity to discuss both the concepts of inclusion in both the sort of the broad sense, and then specifically as it might apply to social emotional learning and some of the social skills that we're trying to deliver to our students, particularly early on in their education. Melinda, thanks for taking the time to talk today. How are you doing?
Good. I am, though I'm feeling better now that school's out for the summer. So again, You're almost there.
That's right. By the time this is on the air, I will be done. And thank goodness for that, because it has been a tough year. So as an intervention specialist, can you tell us just a little bit about sort of what you do, what your background is in education?
Sure. Yeah, I have my master's in education, and I have a license K through 12. So more of the mild to moderate, but I do work with moderate to intensive. And I worked at a middle school for a couple of years in a resource room. And then I moved on to elementary students. So right now I'm in an autism unit at a school district where we do a lot of push out, or inclusion, as we like to say. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. But I do tutor on the side. And now I'm working with elementary school students.
All right, great. So, and I'm certified 6 through 12, though I've only really worked in high school and mostly at the end of that. I student taught in middle school, so there's a little overlap. But I always want to sort of clarify the ages, because I think that sometimes when we have discussions about how we sort of handle any education issues, the right answer in second grade is not always the right answer in 12th grade. And we got to make sure we sort of clarify that. And in some cases, the right thing is just the right thing. But it's always important to recognize that these issues are maybe a little more complex than just, hey, everybody do this thing and it'll be better. Before we get into maybe some of the details of your views on inclusion and SEL and the rest, let's go with one of the big questions to get us started here. In your mind, what is the purpose of school? Like, what are we trying to do with formal education? What should our goals be?
Gosh, yeah, I feel like, and I'm sure it just gets skewed throughout the years too. I think when I started versus, now, I'm 32, so this is my year 8. It's a lot different. But I do feel like the purpose of education should be that students should grow up to be valued members of society, right? We should train them to be more socially fit, academically fit, and behaviorally fit to fit into society, and also be curious, right? And be them and feel that they have value and feel important in the school district or in their environment, a safe, inclusive environment, right?
I love it. And I think I agree with pretty much all that, because I don't know, I'm big on sort of thinking about the whole student, because sometimes, the grades that you get in classes are not actually a great reflection of who you are as a person or your potential later on. And so sometimes we get a little bogged down in the details sometimes of the structure. Now you did, a lot of your answer had to do with sort of a student's social functions and their ability to get along with others and to play a role in the community and things like that. And so this one is, I'm going to ask a question I don't even fully agree with. I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit, but is school the best place for that? And I ask that because you're coming from a perspective thinking about special education students. And if we're not careful, sometimes it's very easy when we label students, and whether it's special ed or we label gifted or whatever, sometimes those labels get attached and you get sort of, you get hemmed into this sort of box, and it's very difficult to be your natural self. And I think that sometimes school, for all the good things we try to do, right? Like sometimes that's counterproductive. Is school, as we do it today, the right place to build those kind of social skills?
Yeah, especially with this pandemic year, right? That is a whole other layer. All that group work and all that socialization and all the social skills I practiced was kind of squashed this year, right? Because they're hiding behind those shields. And I'm not sure about you, we only had 3 weeks of remote. The rest was in person, just with mask and social distancing this year. So man, that is a tough question with that layer added to it. And a lot of schools, they put you, they say to be creative and think outside of the box and be you and be different. But just as well as me being a teacher, they kind of force you in that box all the time with the standardized testing and the rules and the grades, like you just said. So I think we have a lot of work to do to kind of push in that direction to getting them to where they should be, and making sure every student gets an equal opportunity for an education and to feel included and safe and secure and comfortable, right? And to enhance those social skills.
Yeah, this has come up in a few previous podcasts. That's why I asked the question. I
No,
generally agree with you, but I've had a few guests who made me reconsider, like, is school the best environment for some of this? And I think, like, certainly it's not for at least some students. The question is it for most? And a few years ago, I would have said absolutely yes. And I find myself questioning it. So, okay. But so there's a lot of sort of the whole student in all of this. Yeah. And so let's take that opportunity to sort of introduce your book, because that's really what kicked off this conversation and really, just got this podcast sort of going. So the book is called Empowering Inclusion. But a lot of it has to do with social emotional learning and new SEL standards and things like that. So what is the book really about? And how does it maybe serve some of those purposes that you just talked about in terms of serving the whole student and helping them find themselves and their role in a community?
Yeah, it's kind of, so it started from when I was an intervention specialist and I was put in a lot of general education classrooms. Like, do you co-teach with any intervention specialists, or do you work with them?
So, I mean, I've team taught, that's a term we use, with several different special education teachers throughout my career. This year was, I think, my second time co-teaching with an ELL teacher, English language learners. So yes, there's another teacher in the room, but not necessarily someone in a specialist role, at least as we define it in my division.
Yeah. So I started there because I kept putting myself in classrooms, but not really knowing my role per se. My students would be in there, they'd be a seat in the classroom, right? But then I never understood like what my role was really. Like, I would work with them in small group, or I would do, the accommodations on their IEP, but I felt like I wasn't maximizing their full potential or making their environment safe and inclusive and comfortable. They were kind of forcing themselves into that box, even though they didn't quite fit in there, like our previous, what we just talked about. Right. So my book has a lot of, at the beginning, like how to work as a team, communication tips, collaboration tips, like what to do when you're new and starting out and you're working with that veteran teacher that's kind of stuck in their ways and only wanting to do things their way. Like how to work through difficult personalities. So you may have a new person in your room that you're just not sure, how they roll or what their interests are or anything like that. And then my book also has like a ton of social emotional lessons for any type of grade. So I tried to make it easy, as convenient as possible. With us, like, I like checklists. I like things that I could quickly just look at. I hate when people tell me how to teach, as like a teacher. So it's like really kind of like, did you ever read Goosebumps growing up?
A little bit.
Okay. A lot of those lessons I have in there is kind of like a choose your own ending adventure. I give a lot of suggestions and a lot of like tips, like, hey, you can try this, but obviously it's kind of based on your students' interests and what they're into. And then I have those frequently asked questions or challenges at the end of my book, which is kind of unique. So it's for teachers that like might be struggling with the concept of social emotional or inclusion. I'm just a calculus teacher. What am I going to do? I don't have time to teach, feelings, right? So in the back, it kind of
there are no feelings in calculus.
Yeah, right. No, please. They come in and do the math. So it kind of debunks it at the end. I also included like an inclusive dictionary. I was just trying to think of anything that somebody could kind of come at me with, like, hey, but you missed this or this. It's just kind of like a tool for your classroom, especially now that social emotional is on the forefront and kind of not forcing teachers to do it. A lot of them are adapting to the standards, but they're just not sure how.
So, and I think, there is a link between, say, the inclusion model or maybe some of the skills and services we're trying to deliver to special education students and the social emotional learning. But now that the SEL is sort of gone big and it's sort of being pressed everywhere, all students, all grade levels, et cetera, that it probably changes a little bit of the delivery, I'm guessing. And so from your perspective, thinking both from the special education perspective, but also thinking about younger students, what's that transfer like? Like, how different are the lessons when you're in, say, the whole class setting versus a small group pull out situation or something like that?
Yeah, the biggest difference because we've been doing it for years. Like any special ed teachers, like, oh, we've been doing feelings and big problem, little problem, and impulse control for like, that's my whole jam. So when I started doing the whole group lessons, it was kind of neat to see my students feel even more included, right? They didn't have to stand up, go to my room, do it privately. Usually I would give them all this great knowledge and then they'd go back to the gen ed classrooms and nobody else knew their language. So like, how would they ever be able to generalize, if only they knew what some of this terminology meant, but no other students knew in the classroom. And really, when talking to the gen ed teachers, so many other students benefited. Like this is, kindergarten, first grade, we're talking about, they all could use lessons on impulse control or big problem, little problem, or, the feelings and using iMessages. So self-advocating for yourself or social awareness. So it was really neat to see week after week these whole group lessons. My students were mastering their goals. They were staying in the classroom longer. If my students got upset, other students would prompt them. If their triggers, upset them and they started yelling, a lot of other students would be like, hey, use your toolbox. We have the visual up on the wall. Like, they would know where to go in the classroom to independently seek it out. So,
I think it's you're right. There's the need for sort of the common vocabulary and the common expectations of it. Just as sort of like sort of an anecdote, I guess, that would support this, but I'm big on, take a few deep breaths. So my son just turned 5. And since he was probably 1.5, 2 years old, like, he starts to get angry. Come on, buddy. Like, let's take 2 deep breaths. Like I told him, as you get older, you'll have to take more, but 2 deep breaths,
yeah.
But we just finished our first season of T-ball. And so when the kids get up and they're nervous and they're about to hit, I tell all of them, like, take a deep breath, like focus, whatever. And at the beginning, I didn't think about the fact that at the beginning of the season, they didn't know what I was talking about. So they just like looked at me funny and breathed normally. So then I had to like explain it. And then, whatever nerves or jitters they had when they step up and all the parents are cheering and stuff. And it really makes a huge difference. But I thought about it. I was like, that was something that my kid already knew. And I didn't think twice about it. Right. But it was new for the rest of those kids. And it works better when they all have that same routine, when like that was the expectation. That's what we're going to do. And so maybe as a way of like defining norms in the classroom, or maybe sort of creating school culture that is supportive of that, I think that's great. What, in your experience, what has the gen ed classroom teachers' response been? Like, are people embracing all of this? Like, how resistant have people been? Because I can tell, I'll let you go first, but I know it's probably a little different in high school than elementary school. But what's that reaction been like as we've seen this become sort of a bigger focus?
Yeah, elementary school, it's been great. I definitely can agree with some of the older grades. I would feel like there was some pushback. And it really depends on like personalities and how you communicate too. Like I have 4 paraprofessionals that work in my room too, that are all very inclusive and very friendly and, open-minded. We do a lot of training on, it's their classroom, we're guests, make sure we're an equal member, like a lot of good personality mixes, which I feel like that's huge in itself, and relationship building to make that inclusive environment with the adults. So I'm sure you've, worked with people in the past that might not be as open and honest and fun with the kids, that you might have to work a little harder at. But yeah, I do feel like, but the teachers that I work with, so I work with 5 gen ed teachers, which is a ton, right? And my kids are all spread out K through 3. It's been kind of contagious. Once you kind of do a good model and do a good example, other teachers kind of look at you and they want that kind of culture and that, inclusive environment. So I give a lot of my teachers tools though to keep in their classroom. So if I did a lesson on impulse control where I just put stop, think, make a good choice. And we had a big visual, like I'm an artist too, so I like to make all those big visuals and I like to leave them with the teacher. So that way I give them something to kind of work on too. So it's not just for my kids, it's for our kids, right? It's all 24 kids.
Yeah. And I like how you say that, just because I think that a lot of the better special education team teachers I've had really sort of work with all the kids in the room. Like the same way I'm teaching every kid in the room, I'm walking up to everybody, we're doing all of it. Very anecdotal, but in my experience, I think the teachers who try to help every kid in the room tend to have a bigger impact. They may spend a little extra time with the kids on the SPED roster. They may do a little extra work with, the accommodations or tracking some data, but in the end, a kid has to pay pretty close attention to know who that, quote unquote, who they're there for, except
Right.
for, I mean, when you like pull out for small group testing, I mean, then we all know,
Yeah,
but
always.
like short of that kind of thing, I always think it's nice when everybody feels like we're all working together. And maybe that's how we should think about it, I think, but certainly not everyone does. I say from the high school sort of perspective, as we've done more and more of the SEL, I'd say stuff, just put it broadly,
Yeah.
daily lessons or whatever it may be. Like I love the idea, like I'm on board. Every time they're like, we're gonna do this lesson on mindfulness. I'm like, cool. I am happy to talk with students about mindfulness. I've got some cool, like I can pull some Eastern philosophy. We got some stuff to do, and then I go through the lessons. I'm like, oh man, like I can't. There's no way I can make this not cheesy. And when you're dealing with a kid who's 17 or 18,
Oh yeah.
that you don't get a ton of buy-in, although some of them do recognize the value in it. And so I feel like I end up like modifying a lot of things because I think it's valuable. I just also think like, man, that's a tough sell when you're gonna put kids in, especially online. We're gonna put you in a breakout room to go share your feelings with other kids you
No
barely
way.
know. Like no one's talking in that room. So it's like we're gonna skip that part, not because we're skipping the lesson, just because I think you have to really be careful in the delivery.
For sure.
When someone tries too hard to be your friend, it doesn't really feel friendly. And I think that that's sometimes how we go wrong with SEL, particularly in the upper grades.
Huge.
Is the buy-in from the students good in the lower grade levels? Like, is this something that the students
Love
are
it. Yeah.
embracing?
They are all the time. Like they know when I come into the classroom, and that's the best part. When you're talking about the inclusion and not knowing who you're there for, kind of. I do feel like with this versus years where I would just go in and again pull out or just quickly be observing in the background, taking data, all that. Like a lot of the kids do not know why I'm there. They just think I'm there for this awesome lesson. They love all little kids love to talk about themselves and their feelings though. Like what makes you mad is like probably the best lesson you could do over and over again, and they'll like be obsessed with it. They love talking about themselves. So that's been really nice. Pixar shorts. I don't know. Is your kid into Pixar? Like
Yeah,
Disney
yeah,
Plus? Disney
yeah.
Plus keeps like producing the best quick little SEL clips with literally no words that you could probably show any grade. Like so many of them, I usually do that, like just a 3-minute clip, and then be like, "Oh, how do you think that bird's feeling?" Or "What would you do if you were him?" But just to teach empathy and sympathy and acceptance and belonging. And I feel like with high schoolers too, you can probably find a lot of good, pretty intense short clips or things that they're passionate about right now with the government. Or I don't know if you ever want to get into politics or government or
Yeah,
our world with high schoolers.
we get weird in my
That's
class.
fun.
Yeah, we do all that. I teach. I mean, I teach mostly 11th grade AP language and composition, and then usually 11th or 12th grade. I always tell them like I want to work the ends. Like, give me the smartest kids in the building, and give me the struggling students or the kids who are they're going to misbehave and no one else is going to want to deal with it. And like, that's where I want to be. I have very little interest in the middle. It's too messy. I'm not, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but like, I like the concept of differentiation, but I'm not really great at doing it in any kind of significant way, like not in a formal way, I guess. And so, I'm like, give me your, I don't know, it's probably been a bad descriptor, but sort of give me your top and bottom, or your most challenging and your whatever. And then those discussions, I think, go, in my opinion, it goes a little easier because you can target your audience a little bit. You have a better sense of who's in the room. But that doesn't mean that that's great. Like I was just thinking, you were talking about the Pixar shorts, and I was thinking about how like a lot of the newer Sesame Street stuff, like all the Cookie Monster things are all impulse control, and it makes me laugh so hard. It's always like, stop, think about it. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, we've been trying to cut out a lot of TV lately, but my kids can like recite what they're going to say when they get to those parts. I'm like, good. Now actually live it, and then I think like, man, I think my 2.5-year-old does this better than some of the 16, 17-year-olds I have in class. Like, you recommended the Pixar stuff. I'm like, that's probably better. Cause if this year doesn't end soon, I'm 2 weeks away from showing them Cookie Monster clips.
You might as well.
Yeah. Just go for
Get
it.
that stuff out there.
Do you think with this push, especially in the lower grade levels, not that this is something that gets to go away or you get to stop trying. Like last summer, I talked with Sarah Potler-Lahane, who she's the CEO of Move This World, which is an SEL sort of company. They have a program, they go into schools and all that. And I asked her, how important is it? Like, can we just sort of teach these skills and then do occasional reminders? And she was adamant. This has to be like an everyday or an almost everyday kind of thing. She's like, it's like your fitness routine. You can't run once a month and expect to be in great shape. Like, you got to stay with it, which makes sense. But it also requires a pretty heavy investment, especially when you say you're getting into upper grade levels and we've got standardized tests and kids worried about college and things like that.
Right.
Do you think that there's the possibility that if we do it well in the lower grades now, not that we get to skip it later, but that it wouldn't have to be an everyday kind of thing? Like, could we dial this back to once a week doing an SEL talker lesson if the students really learn it well early? Or do you believe it really has to be that constant practice?
No, I mean, I think good teachers naturally do it though. I think, when the standards were released, a lot of teachers were mad and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. But I do think like naturally good teachers do it. They always have a growth mindset, right? And they talk positively and they push their kids to their full potential. They hone in on their interests. They talk about things like, how does it make you feel? And let's talk about it. They definitely spot the kids right on the lower and higher end, and they target them and they make sure they're feeling comfortable and inclusive, right? So I feel like, I hope, I don't think it has to be like down your throat every day, but I do think it's got to be like a little bit more naturally universal, right? Again, good teachers will pass this along.
And I agree. And teaching English, I think it's probably easier because we're already, we're going to read, let's talk about how the character's feeling in this part of the book, or, we can do that, to your example earlier of like the calculus teacher, like God forbid the chemistry teacher, when you tell the chemistry teacher, like, let's address some feelings, like, I mean, unless we do neurotransmitters, like, what do I really have to do with this? That can be difficult. So, okay. So I'm going to jump into what you just said about the SEL and how good teachers do it naturally is how I feel about differentiation. So when I just said a minute ago, I'm like, I like the concept, but I'm not great at it in the formal ways. I think if you know your kids well, and if you're actually reading the work, I'm not a big fan of like graduated rubrics. I'm not a big fan in most cases of handing out different assignments. I mean, sometimes I will modify the assignment, but like everybody got the same paper. And then as they start working, I walk around, I'm like, hey, we're going to, instead of 4 sources, you need 2 or something. Like, I can make those little modifications on the fly. And when they turn in the work, I don't care how clear your rubric is, it's always going to be somewhat subjective. I know what to expect. And so, you know what I mean? And so I like differentiation in that way, where you have to know the kids and you have to do that. But for people who are really into differentiation, like what I just said is kind of blasphemy. and so, like, to what extent do you think that is fair for differentiation or for SEL? Like, can we really rely on the fact that a good relationship with the students and a teacher who's building those relationships can just sort of do it naturally? Or do all of these things really need to be more regimented and more purposeful?
Gosh, that's a tricky question, because I feel like what you just said, the regimented and more purposeful, it's almost scary to like, because the wrong teacher would would mess that up a little bit. I hate saying that, but they would get it and they'd be like, all right, I'm following my checklist and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But still that relationship piece is missing, right? So I do think good teachers, like you said, just naturally differentiate. I know I do too. I love doing more stuff on the fly. I'm not much of a planner. I like to just kind of naturally let my class happen and see where the flow goes, and then differentiate as you go on. And look, I'm a special educator. Like, I just feel like it's more the relationships and the
I've never gotten any pushback or any concern from my team teachers, so in that way I always feel like it's okay. But then sometimes you get observed and it's, well, hey, how did you differentiate the activity for the students? I'm like, well, I didn't, because they're all here together in the same class. But in the end, that kid's going to turn in a better paper than that kid, but they're going to get the same grade because I understand how hard they worked to get there and the growth that came with it. And so like, I'm okay with that, but I know that sometimes that isn't the right answer, right? Because you're putting a lot of faith in the teacher as the professional. Right. What do you think is the right way to do this? Maybe where you don't have that faith in the teacher, not that they're a bad teacher, just maybe you see someone who's not doing the differentiation piece, or they're not naturally building an SEL, or they're not building great personal relationships with the students. What's the next step? Like, as an intervention specialist, like, do you just like go in and beat them up and say, this is what we're going to do? Or
come in with a mean face and I like lay down. Usually just like, again, like my first always thing is building the relationships and getting to know the kid. But again, if that's like piece is missing or is that a struggle? I always like the offering choices, like kind of figuring out what their learning style is or what they're into, and then kind of offering choices. So like I have one student right now who struggles to communicate, but he is super bright and super smart. So he's in the classroom the whole time, and he just he needs a word bank, or he needs those choices. So like, what's this a picture of? And then he cannot answer it verbally. And I'd say a duck or cow, and he'll know the answer. Right. So that's just a natural, easy, quick accommodation that he gets all the time. But again, just like, yeah, kind of knowing your audience and giving choices. Or I like to find the weird accommodations too. I'll go in and be like, have you tried this? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, just a Thomas the Tank visual on his desk can easily, something.
Well, and that's building that relationship and the rest. I think that sometimes, and this frustrates me probably more as I get older, and I have to be careful because I think, I'm finishing my 15th year, and I'm getting to that point where I'm like, I'm getting old enough and like crusty enough that I have to be really careful I don't get stubborn on things I shouldn't be stubborn about. But I think that sometimes the way, say, divisions and so whole school systems or even principals roll out some of these initiatives, it really feels like we're kind of dummy proofing things for the teachers. Like any idiot could do it if you just follow this plan.
Yep.
And that's good when you have a teacher who might fall into the realm of any idiot. The problem is those same initiatives a lot of times, discourage or alienate the stronger teachers, or maybe maybe even someone who's sort of average or slightly above average, but who has great relationships with the students. In the end, it doesn't feel like something that's really helping. I'm just thinking from your perspective, where you're working with, you said 5 different teachers, K through 3, right? Yeah. Like, so you have a lot of experience sort of seeing the different things happening in these different rooms. Like, is there really a way where we could differentiate it for the teachers? Like, does the principal have to tell everyone we're all doing the same thing this way? Or is it possible to differentiate in a staff, or is that not going to fly?
You would think that no, because of the rubric, right, that we have to follow as teachers when we get observed. I always joke about that, actually. I'm like, we call it schlectifying, like it's just differentiation. And I'm just like, when is our rubric going to be like differentiated? Like I have to get observed the same way as a gen ed teacher or an art teacher. How that's unfair. Like I know my observer had to observe me with my class, but unfortunately only one student was in my room at the time. And, my observer just saw me with one student. I was like, how can I differentiate? How can I really make it, like what the heck? Like
I had to go through an assignment and then like, okay, you're done. Hold on. I need you to do that again, but in a different way. Like, hold on.
Right. Did you look at the standard on my dry erase board? Because that's part of this thing too, like it was so, it was silly. And it was frustrating because it's, again, why don't we get differentiated? And same with inclusion. You think you try to be more inclusive in the classroom, but then look at your staff. You're like, how do you build an inclusive environment within the staff? Or how do we work on those social skills as a staff?
Yeah.
Versus the students.
Yeah, well, at that point, that becomes a discussion about math teachers again. So no,
right, yeah, those calculus. Yeah,
not much for social skills. So thinking about inclusion, and I'm thinking. Well, actually, I guess I'll let you sort of clarify. Like, when we talk about inclusion, or when you talk about inclusion in your book, like what does that mean? Just as a term, like you said, you included a little dictionary in the book to make sure listeners are all on the same page. When we say inclusion, what are we actually talking about?
We're just kind of talking about the whole classroom environment. So wherever your classroom is, if you're an art teacher, if you're a science teacher, your particular classroom, how could you make that environment more inclusive, safe, friendly, welcoming, based off your students that you get? So whether you have students on the spectrum or IEPs or ELL, it doesn't matter. Like you could have all gen ed kids perfectly fine, right? Those middle ground kids. It's just how to make your room a little bit more inclusive and welcoming.
Okay. Because I know that, when we have discussions about like the inclusion model and things like that, where I work, it's really a discussion about how we can make sure that our special education students, our English language learners, special populations are in the gen ed classroom as much as possible, right? That there's, we're not doing a lot of sort of self-contained or sheltered classes if they can be avoided and things like that. And I feel like I get stuck on this one because I see the benefits on both sides. Like, is there a balance in your mind, like a personal opinion? Is it okay to balance that? Like sometimes the pull out is necessary, or sometimes the self-contained class is necessary, versus like sort of what I always hear is, the kid should be in the gen ed classroom as much as is possible. And I'm like, well, I don't like the word possible. Like, I wish we could replace that with reasonable, because we may hit a point where the kid's struggling and now it feels extra weird because you're maybe not struggling, other people aren't struggling as much, or in some cases that kid's going to be fine, but they need extra help, which takes time away from the other students in the room. And so there's always a little balancing act. Like it, in terms of that sort of thought of inclusion, not just making the classroom inclusive, but actually having those kids, I don't want to say those kids, that sounds terrible, but having like all of the students, but having all of the students in the room as much as possible. Like how important is it that it's a 100% all the time thing versus how much could we or should we differentiate the amount of extra time or services a student gets outside of the classroom?
Yeah, I always say like when it becomes like inclusion isn't just a seat in the classroom, right? Like a lot of people assume that, oh, they're in here, they're not, misbehaving, they must be fine. I feel like, yeah, like you said, there's so much more than that, and there should be some pull out time if it's really benefiting the student. Yeah, it's like kind of a short answer, but yeah, I definitely don't agree with like all in. And I know there was a big push for a while that they were like, oh no, like no more self-contained, they are all in, and it's what's best for the student.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of where we're at. And like I said, I think in a lot of cases it's a good thing. But it's not always a good thing. And I say that just because I think that sometimes that creates so much extra stress on the student, or not, we should always be making a decision based on what's best for students. But in some cases, it creates such an additional burden for the teacher, depending on the level of student needs, that while in the end, the kid can be in the room and they're fine, the amount of extra time that's going into preparation to make that work might in the end be a net negative if that's time being taken away from the other things that are going on in the room and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always feel like, I always want to be careful how I say that. It's like, it's not about not having the kids that are not caring.
Yeah. But there's so many different models too. Like I feel like in my situation, I can't be in every classroom all the time, right? 5 gen ed teachers, I wish I could be in their classrooms all day and like parallel teach and do small groups. And then I wouldn't just pull my kids, I would pull more kids that were struggling with this. And, it just depends like your layout of the classroom too. I feel like some schools are really, when I taught middle school, I was in there the whole period, but I also did every subject. I would follow my kids from math to language arts to science to social studies, which seems crazy now that I'm talking about it, because that's a lot of subjects, and I don't know how I could have been effective in every single classroom, but it's
so in that setting, when you said you followed the students, were you the content teacher and the specialist in that capacity, or were you working alongside another teacher when you're doing all that?
I was working alongside.
So how important is that relationship? Like, I know you have some things in the book about helping, new teachers or helping people sort of form that working relationship with a co-teacher, but like how important is it to both build that professional relationship, but also to maintain it?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, my first year I was so, when you're super young, like 22, and you're working with like, this teacher was about to retire, like no way was I about to be like, hey, I'll teach this lesson, or can I take a small group? And this was social studies, which wasn't like my strongest subject. But the math teacher and I really got along, and we were able to kind of, again, more differentiate. I had a lot of artists at the time. So I said, what if we just did a lesson? Again, those math teachers, right? What if we did a lesson where, remember the movie School of Rock?
Yeah.
Remember that one with Jack Black? We showed a couple little video clips, and we're like, what if we just took some math concepts, those boring vocabulary words, and had students create CD covers with a math concept, and then all the song titles in the CD would relate to, the vocabulary word that they chose. And it was the best lesson, we could have ever come up with, because some of their creativity and the song titles and the artsy students got to design their CD cover. I mean, guaranteed those are the vocabulary words they know to this day.
Right. Yeah. You make like a connection to it. When I'm teaching vocab, I always tell them like, I teach a lot of word roots. Some like research says that if I teach you 20 words, in 6 months, 8 months, you're only going to remember about 7 of them. But if I teach you word roots, even if you only remember 7 of them, that unlocks like hundreds of other words, So I'm like, bang for your buck. This is probably the way to do it. But to get them to remember them, I always try to pick like the most awkward or funny word, like something that like, they all cringe. Like, I can't believe the teacher just said that in front of the class. And I'm like, here's the thing, guys. Like, when you cringed, you just had an emotional reaction to it, which increases the chances you remember it. I could put a bunch of boring SAT words on the board and hey, it looks great, but you're not going to remember any of it. So what good is that? So, say finding those things that engage the student, whether it's through high interest or just something that provides that additional point of connection or that emotional reaction, I think can have sort of great results. But sometimes it's also hard to plan something like that with someone you just started working with. So like for me, I worked with, I couldn't even count at this point how many different special education teachers, or in a couple cases, the reading specialist, like in my room. It was really rare for a long time to work with the same person more than 1 year in a row.
And I don't know. They don't do that often though. It seems like they switch it up on me all the time. It's almost like, okay, give that teacher a break. It's now like, which is a bummer because then you can't really build a good relationship. Like one teacher, we're going on 4 years and it's perfect now. We got a good groove. We know each other. We trust each other. We know like it's great. But yeah, a lot of the times they rip that away from you.
Do you think that is about like giving, say, a teacher, like you just said, like a break, versus how much of that is this is a place I'm getting skeptical. And I will tell you that the administrators in my school are fantastic, like literally the best. So I'm going to say something critical, and it's not really of them, but I'm beginning to suspect that a lot of the things we deal with in schools that are difficult, say in terms of like, we need to differentiate because we can't schedule kids into classes that better target their ability levels. Like differentiation is great, but it's hard when you have a kid who's going to score 1,600 in the SAT and a kid who's going to score an 800. Like maybe they shouldn't be in the same English class just because like their needs are so very different. And while yes, we can differentiate it, man, I could be a lot more effective if we put them in a place where I can sort of target that a little bit more. But we don't do it because it's hard to schedule. It's expensive to reduce the class sizes. It's difficult to figure out the scheduling. So when we think about how we schedule, say, special education or language learner teachers, et cetera, how much of that do you think is about just the complexity of it? Like, you said give the teacher a break. Like I'm starting to suspect the reason we don't do all this better is just it's too hard to work the schedule. So the people just end up wherever. Like, is that, am I being too cynical?
Yeah, like, 98% for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone who I worked with for, I think, 3 or 4 years in a row, and she just actually switched over, and now she's in the English department. But we worked and I said it in a meeting. They did this meeting, the professional development before school started, and they talked about inclusion they were talking about all the different ways to differentiate and all these things you could do with your team teacher. And this is great. And they had 2 teachers come in from middle school, and they were literally finishing each other's sentences. And I was like, wow, it's like they're married. Like, this is strange, And they're basically, the whole presentation is basically like, you should be like us and teach like this. And everybody just sort of sat there and was like, I don't want to be the guy who does. All right, I'll be the guy. And I raised my hand. I was like, how many years have you worked together? And they're like 8. And I was like, oh, because I've never worked with someone more than 1 year in a row. So the chances of me being able to do anything you're doing is basically 0, right?
Right.
And they didn't answer. They like quickly looked at the administrators in the room, and everyone was like, but you know what? I'm glad I said it, because the next year I worked with the same teacher again. And then after that, we got 3 years in a row and things got better. Do you think that would be like a model for success though? Like if you could just snap your fingers and make something happen, like would you find the ways to team those teachers long-term?
Yeah, especially if they wanted to. Like, did you get a say in who you get to work with? Like, I know I don't, but
I get a request form. So, you put down like, what classes do you want to teach next year? You may or may not get them. If you're going to team teach, who do you want? So so, I mean, I can put the names down.
Like, they don't give us much time to like ever, I never went to a staff meeting or anything where I got to like really, even like an icebreaker, like I get to know you, like what's your personality like? What don't you like? Do you like coffee? Like, I feel like I had no time to like ask important questions before we jumped into this like whole year. And even, as a teacher, like your planning and stuff always, I don't even know what a planning period really is. I know it gets disrupted with something.
Yeah, they're like, we need to do more common planning. And I'm like, I don't have time for my regular planning. I can't triple the time and have a conversation with someone else about it. Like, I get the value. There's a practical limitation to what I can do here. A lot of this, again, is coming back to the idea of relationships. And so, we talked about sort of the SEL piece for students. We've talked about, say, the students being comfortable and trying to get them, engaged in the class and the rest. But from the teacher perspective, like, I don't know, like, could you write a sequel of your book basically for like the teacher piece? Like,
oh my gosh, I could write 10 more books. Yeah. After I finished, I was like, and reading my book, I'm like, this is kind of like, I like you talking to you. I know you'll read it and you'll be like, well, it's kind of common sense, right? Like a lot of it is like relationship building and how you communicate and how you work together, And I just feel like after this year with the pandemic too, adding to it, I could write so many other books.
Yeah. I keep thinking like we keep pitching the social emotional learning for students, and I'm maybe starting to suspect that the teachers need it as much, if not more, and the time to do it, And so again, like you said, to build that relationship with your co-teacher requires time and decent strategies. Is that a common topic discussed, say, in special education circles, like that relationship piece? Is that something that has any sort of momentum moving forward?
I sure hope so. I know when I started writing the book, I reached out to a couple Facebook groups just as like, hey, what are your struggles? Basically for my frequent challenges in the back of the book. Like, what's your biggest challenge with inclusion, or what are the positives and negatives? And so many of them said that relationship with the gen ed teacher, because again, a lot of people like going into special ed, like I always wanted self-contained and I wanted my little unit to myself and, do the coffee cart and do all those fun life skills. And then I'm always in a job where inclusion is so pushed. I always get those like quirky kids who are super bright and, which is fine. But I found myself more in the inclusion model, even though I really wanted that self-contained.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of special ed teachers do like having students to themselves and doing big things. And when it comes to working with teachers, it does seem like there is like a just miscommunication or just a missing piece in the education world. Even when I went to college, we didn't talk about it very much. It was like, this is what parallel teaching looks like, and that's
yeah. And then they always have you, student teach or practice it with somebody with so much more experience that
right.
It would take so much time of working together before you're even close to sort of on a level playing field that,
definitely.
You're not even learning in like a good lab setting, wherever the conditions are perfect. Like you're learning in imperfect conditions. And so it's hard to carry that forward. I mean, you just referenced your own education, and I didn't ask you this earlier on, but as a student, both thinking K through 12, but also college, like what was school like for you? Like, were you doing the kinds of things you're talking about now? Did you like school? Like, how was your education experience?
Yeah, I did. I loved school. I had a lot. I loved my friend. I mean, I loved it for all the social reasons. Like I ran cross country and track. I had all my friends. I formed really good relationships with my teachers. I went to school. I'm over in Ohio by Cleveland. I went to a school and graduated with 1,000 kids. So I had a huge class. And then I went to Findlay, a smaller college, basically about the same size as my high school. Right. And I ran there. And again, I loved it there and got my master's. So I always had a good education experience, I would say. I did.
What did you major? Yeah, what did you major in undergrad?
Oh, a bachelor in science. I really wanted to do physical therapy I always wanted to do the special needs population. So I was going for that. And then I couldn't get away from education. I really just wanted to be a teacher. So I stopped and got my master's. I know. My poor mother was like, what are you doing?
Yeah. That's a joke I always tell my students. I'm like, if you guys ever feel like you need a reason to not listen to me, just remember that I chose to do this for money. So, the fact that I chose this means you should already be cautious about listening to me.
Yeah.
So this is an idea that I've had for a while. And for me, similar experience. I mostly liked school. I did well. I was involved in stuff, and the stuff that I didn't like, I just sort of rolled my eyes at and whatever. Like, school wasn't terribly difficult for me. But I have like very diverse friend groups, like my whole life. Like I've got 3 or 4 different groups of people, all of whom are like very different, and I think in a way that's helped me a ton in the classroom, because it is really rare I get a kid where I don't have something in common with, or I can reference my friend or, this person, whatever. Thinking about students who maybe for social reasons are a little bit needier, or maybe it's an academic challenge. Do you think that maybe sometimes we do a disservice because, school faculties are largely comprised of people who loved school or were good at it? Like, I keep thinking like, every department needs at least 1 or 2 people who hated school and were only mediocre at it, and then sort of figured it out later on. Like, I'm not saying be a bad teacher. I'm saying maybe someone who didn't like school is the person we need to connect with some of those students. How does that make sense in an elementary school setting? Like when I've got a 17-year-old and I can talk about my buddy who dropped out of school and whatever, like that gives us something to go on, but it's a different conversation when you're 7. So do you think that holds water in an elementary school, that like you need some people who had a different experience?
Yeah, maybe at an elementary school level. I'm really real with some of especially my 3rd graders. Like if they don't want to do an assignment, I'll be like, especially with standardized testing, I am very I can't stand those tests, I'll be honest. But so when they're taking the test and we're on a break, and I'm like, dude, I get it. Like I wouldn't want to be taking this test either. Sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. I'm very real with my students, so I feel like I could get on their level there. But like you said, you always have to have like, I have a very diverse friend group as well. So I use them always, they're always kind of going into my story, especially when I taught middle school. There was like a lot of good interactions. I had 17 boys in my resource room who were pretty defiant and non-compliant. So I used them quite frequently and got down on their level because that makes a huge difference. It really does.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
storytelling's the best.
Yeah. It's just, I think that a lot of teachers were good at school or liked school or both,
Mhm.
and then went to college and then went right back to school. So
Right.
you've never really done anything that wasn't school, and you like school. And so when it comes time to work with someone who is not good at or doesn't like school,
Yes.
like it's difficult to create a working relationship sometimes if you don't have that perspective. And I always think that sometimes that's maybe what we need most is, maybe that person is not going to be great in a faculty meeting, but we're not here to be great faculty meeting
Right.
participants. Like, you need that person to work with the kid who really doesn't want to be there on any given day, because
So
they
true.
understand what that feels like. SEL, we're
Yeah.
teaching empathy. Like, we could just hire people who already have the empathy, like they already know, which would be good. All right. So let's hit one of the big questions that I ask everybody, and it has to do with an ideal school. So think total freedom. Imagine essentially like private school situation. You have essentially no legislative oversight. It's just make sure the kids are learning and not dying, and you can do pretty much anything you want. For
Yeah.
you, if you could run an educational institution of any kind, what would your ideal school look like?
Man, that's like the dream. So endless amounts of money and resources, right? Teachers
Yeah,
would be
no, yeah,
getting
yeah.
paid.
Sky's the limit here.
They would be getting paid based off of their, actual performance, not the rubric performance, but we would have a diversified rubric based on the teacher, right? Again, like, yeah, like endless resources. So there wouldn't have to be a school that's struggling, to pay for books or overcrowded classrooms. We would get to really get down on the students' level, make them curious, make them want to learn, not be so stressed about standardized testing or any of the big tests. Definitely promote kindness, teach those SEL lessons, not stressed about finish. Some teachers will always stress to finish everything that they're supposed to be teaching, right? No more of that. Just again, kind of going with the flow, making things more natural. I'm trying to think what else. Resources. Increase more, especially more play. I know at elementary level, a lot of the kids cannot be kids anymore. It's a lot of worksheets and sitting at the desk. And again, just kind of promote recess a lot more in physical education and get outside.
I think the recess one is a big deal, and honestly, I wish we did it at high school. Like,
All they needed.
like you get 45 minutes in the middle of your day, and we actually started doing that at my school. They worked in like it was like a 12-15 minute every day. You had this sort of period after your first block where you could hang out, talk to your friends, walk around the building, go get help from a teacher, do whatever. But what most kids did was they actually just use it to like cram and finish the homework they didn't do the night before, which is fine. But I'm like, no, guys, like I want you to have like 30-40 minutes. And I want the rule to be you're not allowed to do homework. Like, I don't want you don't touch a book for this period of time. Like, go have some fun, interact with others.
That's amazing.
I mean, yeah, I mean that would, if I had the school, that would probably be part of it though. It'd be like you need that extra time, especially for younger students. I'm thinking about physical space, and you can do this either in ideal terms, or maybe in terms of what is practical to you or the school that you work in. What do you think a classroom, say for second or third graders, should look like? Like we see wildly different things. We have desks and rows, or some have tables. We're seeing a lot more flexible seating with yoga balls and beanbag chairs and whatever. Like,
Right.
and I don't know that there's one answer for every kid, but for you, like what would the room look like to really make the most of an inclusion model for those younger students? Like what should the physical space be like?
Yeah, I feel like it would reflect who's ever in your room. So I always go by the students. So I do have a couple of students that are like super wiggly with, more of like that ADHD out of body experience all the time. So they do have like I have those wiggle discs, and then some group work, some students who like to be left alone, kind of leave them alone, right? I do have a couple that hate group work and just want to kind of be on their own little island, which is fine. Wheelchair accessibility, so making sure if someone, is in a wheelchair, they fit in too. And then again, I always think of like, I think I'm more visual, like the artwork. So what is up on the walls? Does everybody feel like they're being represented? The rules, like I have students who do need, especially younger age, more visuals. So I did this neat whole group lesson where everybody made a visual on their desk. So that way my student that needed, the first and then or the behavior reminder, everybody had something on their desk.
Nice.
So that student didn't stick out. So again, just kind of going by your audience first and then building around that.
Yeah, that's fine. And the reminders actually go a long way, even for the older students. I have like 6 rules that I wrote, probably in a college class. They're like, you need to have rules and they need to be, they're like less than 10 and keep them short and whatever, and they had all these things that keep them positive, whatever. I think I had like 6 and they wouldn't let me do it for my college class. But I was like, there's really only one rule. And my professor, she's like, you can't say that. But I was like, don't be a jerk. Well, so I saw once I was actually hired, I was like, all right, well, it's my classroom. And so I never put that part in writing. I'm always like, guys, just don't be a jerk. And what's funny is the kids loved it. And so the rule is like, if something's going wrong, if someone's bothering you, I make them practice at the beginning of the year. I'm like, pretend like the kid next to you is bothering you. Tell them don't be a jerk, and they all laugh at it. But by the middle of the year, I deal with basically no behavior problems because they're constantly telling each other like, hey, don't be a jerk. And then they kind of laugh like, all right, like I'm doing something that's bothering someone else and they stop it. I don't have the headaches, whatever. But what's funny is the kids think that it's a funny enough rule that my room is now covered in student made posters and artwork that say, don't be a jerk. So when I started off, I was like, I'm never putting that in writing. What will a parent say, whatever. It's now all over the room. But it's almost entirely made by students. And that's where they sort of gave themselves the reminders and those kind of little things work.
SEL lesson, right? You did that naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing with a lot of this. I think that in a perfect world, you'd be hiring promising young teachers who will get better as they go. There's things I do well now that I never even considered when I first started. And so you always have to remember it's a work in progress. But I think if you hire the right people, you can trust that more of this is going to happen with less, say, administrative oversight or with less structured, rollout of the new initiatives and things like that. Not that we shouldn't have an initiative once in a while, just, there's a lot of different ways to do this right. And totally. Sometimes we forget about that. Yeah. I mean, it's basically what you said about like the furniture as well. Like it has to match the kids in the room. It's right. Maybe there isn't one right answer. In sort of the broadest sense, we've covered a lot of ground talking both about inclusion, team teaching, social emotional learning, and the rest. Is there anything that we either haven't discussed or that you think is worthy of more attention? And I say that, it's halfway a joke because any one of these things could be the subject of an entire book or anything else. But some of that we scooted through maybe a little quickly.
Gosh, I just feel like inclusion now is such a big buzzword and social emotional learning, right, is such a big buzzword that like I think people sometimes have a negative, like I feel like I've been an inclusion specialist like my whole life. Like I've always fought for the oppressed. I always like definitely have been drawn to people who are different and want them to feel included. I run marathons with a girl with Rett syndrome. I work with a ton of, like I do a lot of outside things, besides my job that embrace inclusion. And I just feel like now in this world, like I just feel like it's just been embellished or outgrown or people don't necessarily understand what the definition is or have a negative tone to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why I asked you to define inclusion when we hit that point.
Yeah.
Just, I think that sometimes you hear a word enough and it starts to lose its meaning. Like, and I do this with kids in class, and I try to teach about like why you don't want to repeat the same thing in your paper. I just tell them like, pick a word like, fork or like just something, now say it 20 times in a row. And by the time you're done, I don't care what word you picked, it sounds dumb. Like every word sounds dumb when you say it 20 times in a row. But when you sit through so many professional development sessions and you hear these same terms and these same ideas, and they just keep repeating it, and you have to remember you're in a situation where, on average, most teachers didn't want to be in that session anyway. It's easy to be turned off on a thing that would otherwise have been a very good idea. I mean, is there a way to fix that? Like, I don't like, is there a way to roll these things out better that you think would have more teacher buy-in?
I don't know. I feel like it does come down to personality. Like, I don't know if you sat through like PD days or staff meetings, and sometimes the idea is so good, but the delivery is so poor. And I sit there and I get frustrated because then I think like I would go up on stage and I would say a really funny anecdote, and then I would show all these visuals, and then I would have teachers, express their concerns and I would go through, I do that a lot actually. I just sit and think of different how to differentiate, PD days. So I feel like sometimes it's the delivery or again, when I work with my teachers and we develop something cool or we see this like neat transformation in kids, we kind of like to talk about it so it's a little more contagious, so other people will pick it up, not necessarily, you have to do this, or, make sure to check off this standard. You try to make it as natural and upbeat and fun as possible.
Make it something that people want, not something that they feel like they have to do. I don't know. A lot of those sessions are run by people who are enthusiastic about what they do, and over the last few years, I feel like we've had a lot of tech stuff, new app, new website, new, whatever to use. And they bring people in from the company, and they're enthusiastic and they're knowledgeable, but they're always like, so I was a teacher. And I'm like, yeah, you were a teacher.
Yes.
And then you decided you weren't that into this, or that it sucked, and you went somewhere else. You're probably making more money than me right now. And now you're going to teach this lesson poorly about how to use your thing, and I'm like, I generally just sit and keep my mouth shut. But
that's always my first question. I'm like, why did you leave the job?
Yeah. So why aren't you sitting in the seat I'm in right now?
Right.
That tell you a lot about that person.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't mean that they're bad ideas. I just,
no.
I like you said, you tell a kid, hey, look, sometimes you got to take the test. I tell my students all the time, because I have basically all the standardized tests in Virginia. Kids only take English standardized tests in high school in 11th grade. There's a writing test in March and a reading test in May, and that's it for all of high school. Wow. And so I tend to have a lot of kids in that 11th grade, and I tell them, look, you don't want to take the test. I don't want you to take the test. But in the end, there is some useful data that comes out of this. And consider that sometimes in life we get stuck playing a game we didn't want to play. That doesn't mean you don't try to win. And so we're going to do, we ignore the test for the whole year. And then about 3-4 weeks beforehand, start sort of teasing it in. And then the last 2 weeks before the test, we just grind it out. But we get really good results, and it meant they didn't have to worry about it the rest of the year. We just sort of hit it hard. Like, these are the test taking skills. Here's the stuff on it. And I always tell them, I said, look, that's that final push. That's that last training. Say you run a marathon. You say you run marathons. Like, you do a lot of what's the word for it? Is it interval training? Like, you big run, short run, big run. And then and you work your distance up. And then a few days, a week out or a few days beforehand, you take it a little easier. And I tell them, like, that's basically what we need to do for test prep. And they say, you might not want to run the race, but like, here we are. And if you don't try, it's going to make you and me both look dumb, which you can't say to a second grader. But, when I've got a kid who's 18, I'd be like, look, we're both going to look dumb here. So I'm going to show you what you need, and let's do this. And in the end, just being honest makes a huge difference. Like, they play along. I wish that idea of, like, sometimes we do what we have to do, and the rest of the time we try to do things that are of meaning and value to us. I wish that was more the spirit of how the SEL stuff was presented to the staff, or the inclusion. This is good for everybody, and here's why. But we're going to let you sort of choose the way to do this. Would be great.
I almost feel with that, when like your band gets kind of like, you liked them when they were nothing, and now they're really popular, and you're like, I liked them when they weren't cool, like when they weren't big. That's kind of how I feel about this. Like, no, this is my life forever, and now all of a sudden it's like the talk of the town.
Yeah, now and you're appreciating all the wrong parts of it. Like, the new album wasn't even good. Like,
they're gonna turn poppy and not cool anymore, right?
Yeah. All right, so I want to ask sort of the final question, but I'm gonna pair this with something else. I end every episode asking guests for some books or movies that they would recommend, and this can be education related or for fun or a blend. I've heard about the most detailed professional development books, and I've heard just, here's a list of my favorite baseball movies. Like, we can do a little bit whatever. Before you give us those answers, though, what's something in your book that you think has, like, sort of the high engagement factor? Maybe it's like the challenging situations at the end. Like, what's something that listeners would hear and they might either get a laugh out of or be like, oh, hey, that sounds great. Because one, it's a way to, promote your book. But two, I think, like you just said, we've all heard these words and maybe have very different reactions to them. So given that you have a book called Empowering Inclusion, what's something in there that might have a little wow factor for the listeners?
Yeah, it's not your average textbook, and I'm pretty witty and funny, so there's some pop culture references
if
throughout.
She does say so herself. No.
Yeah. This isn't a typical boring read. I tried to keep it short and simple and practical. So it has a good flow, and I'm also an illustrator, so I have some of my cute little illustrations throughout the book too.
Nice. Yeah, what's the most challenging situation? You said at the end, you said you crowdsourced ideas of like what troubles people had faced. What's one that shocked you, whether it went in the book or not? What's something that you heard a lot of people say that maybe surprised you or was more common than you expected?
Just like the gen ed teachers not following the IEP, or the gen ed teacher doesn't want my kids in there. They keep, it's basically a lot of those. So I have a
Yeah.
lot of those challenges in there. When you work with difficult personalities, basically it all comes down to that, like how well you can work with each other.
Yeah. And I love, because the teacher who's hard to work with in that way is
Mhm.
usually the hardest on the kids who are hard to work with.
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like, you can somehow it's like you're the same person and you don't even know it.
Right, right.
Um,
Whether you're the intervention specialist or the gen ed teacher, or there's always one. So
yeah. So,
yeah.
okay. So for your recommendations, books, movies, what do you think listeners should check out?
I'm a big fan of like simple like young adult books. Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper. Have you ever read that one?
I've heard of it. I have
So
not read it.
good. It's just about a student who is different, who is cannot communicate like you or I could, and is an actual genius. So that's a great book to kind of like, if you are skeptical about inclusion, you could always read it and have a good heart at the end.
Cool.
And then I love the book Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. It's just a very simple, like two middle schoolers who ride a bus from different backgrounds. And I love how the author does one point of view from Eleanor, and then the next chapter it's Park's point of view. So again, just a very heartfelt, easy read. And then I'd have to say Shane Burkaw is another one of my favorites, and my student favorites too. He writes adult books, about his life. He has muscular dystrophy. So his latest is Strangers Assume My Girlfriend Is My Nurse. So it's about him in a wheelchair he's now married to her. I follow him on social media, laughing at my nightmare. He's a fun one to follow. And then he made a children's book, Not So Different, which it's beautiful images of him and all questions that probably children have asked him, which I'm a big fan of, embracing questions and embracing your curiosity. So a lot of students ask him like, why is your head so big? Or, how do you eat? How do you brush your teeth? And he'll just go through every page and just answer all the questions, which is great.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
those are
Oh,
my
good.
faves.
Yeah, and I'd say there's a couple in there I've either heard of the book or heard of the author, but I've read none of them. We have a big push for doing more like young adult literature and things like that. And I'm like, yes, but if you could give me time in school to read this, I would love it.
Right.
Like I actually look forward to my own kids getting a little bit older, just so that I can read some of the things that they want me to use in my classes, because I can't bring myself to do it without some extra motivation. Even though, like, I know, some of these sound really good, like I know they're good books, and I just like, I don't know. All-time favorite movie, just for fun. If you had to pick one movie that was the only movie you could watch for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Can I say Zoolander? Is that outdated
You,
yet?
no, you absolutely can. That's a
Mine,
good
yeah.
one.
What is yours? Can I ask?
Oh, that's tough. Probably Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman, like mid 60s. That's old by pretty much any standards at this point. That's probably my favorite movie. There's just enough sort of like clever lines, and I'm a big fan of any book or movie where you get to kind of stick it to the man a little bit. And so yeah, so I actually have that. I have the movie poster hanging in my classroom, and so the kids say, "What's your favorite?" I always tell them, I always give them two favorites of everything. I pick one thing that I think they would also like, and then one they have no idea about. And at the beginning of the year, I tell them the one that I think we'll have in common. And then later in the year, they'll ask again, or they'll be like, what's the thing on the wall? And I tell them the other one. And they're always like, why didn't you say that in the first place? I say, because at the beginning of the year, my job is to form a good relationship with you. And if I tell you that one of my favorite things to watch is PBS Frontline, you're like, who's this crusty old guy? But if I tell you it's South Park, we think that's hilarious and that's great. And by later in the year, when it's appropriate to tell you both, you're like, oh, he's a cool guy and he does like both of them. That's fine. I'm like, you got to kind of control your audience's perceptions of you early in the year. So
Yeah.
I tell them Fight Club earlier in the year, and then Cool Hand Luke later on. So
That's amazing. I'm gonna steal that, and I'll do Paw Patrol, and then we'll do Zoolander halfway through the year.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I was telling them, like, you got to think very carefully about sort of the persona you create early on, and that means I'm not lying to you. It just means I'm telling you one favorite, and I'm saving the other one for later on when I think we're cool enough that I can tell you that other answer. Because if I tell you the other answer early, like you're like, who's this old guy? I can't deal with that. So, all right. Is there anything else? You get a little open mic. You can repeat the name of the book. Maybe call out your social media or website or anything like that. If listeners want to get in contact with you, anything else you want listeners to know before we wrap up?
Yeah, listeners, if you're struggling with inclusion or you have to work with a difficult personality, feel free to reach out. You could follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Empowering Inclusion Toolbox. And my book, Empowering Inclusion, The Tool Teachers Need for All Students Succeed, is out on Amazon right now.
Fantastic. This has been the ClassCast Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Tibbens. We've been speaking with Melinda Arnost, and this has been a great discussion about inclusion and social emotional learning and a lot of things that we could do to maybe better serve all of the students in the school and maybe to help the teachers work better together as well. And I think that that's actually a big part of maybe what this conversation needs to be is, we all hear the words and we got to figure out how to do it the right way. And I think maybe that has to do with sort of creating that trust between the adults in the room, so to speak. So Melinda, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today and to share all this with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
All right. So you can find the ClassCast Podcast on all major streaming services, plus on YouTube and at www.classcastpodcast.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening.